All right, guys, we're going to talk about tariffs. Okay, what does that mean for people like me who, like drop ship or, just business in general? Okay, so most people are very confused about this tariff thing. Tariffs are nothing more than taxes, right? Taxes for us importing things from other countries. Now, this is both good and bad. Bad when we're in a tariff war, good when we're not, right? Well, good really any other time, right? Because, we don't want to get dicked over. We want to make sure that, we're taxing these other countries fairly relative to what, they tax us for importing goods. Now, let's break this down because this is a very complicated subject and I'm not an economist. I just know basic math. Okay, so let's talk about it. Now, with these tariffs, people are like, oh, this is going to reset the economy. It's going to be great. And a recession is what we need. Recessions are never what we need, people. Never what we fucking need. Okay, so let's stop with that bullshit right now. Okay, so right now we're in a tariff war, okay? And we're raising tariffs on countries where we should have, because our tax rate on the things that we import in those countries is much higher than what we're taxing those countries when they import things to us. So, we do want to be fair, right? So in some cases, we have a 30% tariff on us, importing whatever, and we only have a 10% tariff on these other countries when they import shit. And it's like, that's not really fair, bro. But okay, so, Trump is trying to right the ship, so to speak. But in this process, this is going to be a problem because the tariffs are meant to help us and help jumpstart the economy and bring manufacturing back over. That's not going to happen, right? And there's a few things we're going to talk about on why that's just not feasible. So let's say, we have a 10% tariff on China right now, which, I'm just making up numbers, right? And then we raise that shit up to 36%. Okay, now the government doesn't pay that tariff, right? So China comes in, let's say they bring, I don't know, $1,000 worth of steel in, okay? We need to company orders $1,000 worth of fucking steel. Whereas as they were paying $100 beforehand, now they're paying $360 on that steel. Well, they pay that tax, they say, all right, well, bring the steel in, we're gonna pay $360 to the US government. So the government's like, all right, we got some money coming in, we got more money. That's an extra 26%. Great. Instead of $100, we got $360. Awesome. Well, the company says, shit, well, we went from 10%, fucking tariff to 36% tariff on imported Chinese steel. Now we got to raise, our prices to compensate. We have to pass that off somewhere. Companies are not just going to absorb an extra 26% out of the goodness of their fucking hearts. Businesses need to make a profit. And if their profit margins are, let's just say 20%, if you raise the tariff by 26%, that money has to be made up somewhere, right? And it's usually going to be in prices. So everyone's like, yeah, this is great. Trump's sticking it to him. And yes, Trump is sticking it to him. He's going to stick it to these mofos very, very hard. And hopefully, it works out in the long run. In the short run, no. And here's why. Damn near 70% of our GDP comes from consumerism. We are a very consumer-based economy, okay? America imports more than we export, okay? That's just what it is. We use a lot of things from other countries because, again, we are a consumer-based nation. What do you think happens when we impose these tariffs? Either A, these countries are gonna go elsewhere, be like, all right, well, fuck that. Because let's just say if shit becomes more expensive, people aren't gonna buy as much, which in turn, these other countries are like, well, America's not buying as much shit, so let's just go to fucking, I don't know, Italy or some other country that is gonna buy our shit. Okay, that's not good for us. That's not good for the consumer, okay, right? Especially if prices skyrocket because of this. Now, are they gonna skyrocket? Probably not, but they are gonna raise. And people are already feeling the squeeze as is. So what do you think is gonna happen to the lower and the middle class who can't necessarily absorb a hit like that? They're more than likely gonna stop buying shit, or at least as much shit as they normally do. And that's not good for the economy. We need people to spend money, right? We need them to spend money. That is how businesses operate. They produce goods, which in turn people buy, and it just keeps everything going. But if people aren't buying shit because things become more expensive, that's just not good for our economy. It's not gonna come to a screeching halt, right? We're gonna be fine ultimately, but in the short term, it's gonna hurt. This is not gonna help housing prices, by the way. This is not gonna bring down housing prices or bring down the fucking, interest rates and shit. Things that fucking matter, this is not gonna solve immediately. Will this help? I would like to think so. I would hope so, at least. you know, it's not going to help right away. It's going to be a few years where we're going to feel the fucking pain. We're going to feel the fucking burn because of this shit. And it's not going to be a very good time. And I suggest people get ready for what's to come, especially people like me that drop ship, right? So if you're, you know, doing the drop shipping thing from other countries, Pakistan, China, whatever, you know, goods are going to cost more, which means, you know, your margins are going to drop. So you have to raise your prices and you might not be as competitive on a marketplace. So you may end up losing money. Now, a lot of the stuff we do, you know, as far as like my Amazon shit, you know, we're wholesaling, we're getting shit, you know, domestically, but the domestic companies are importing raw goods from overseas, you know, so guess what? Prices are going to go up, but that's just what it is, right? It's business. So be mindful and be ready. What I would do is I would create a service-based business, you know, something along the lines of your skill set, not just any random shit, right? Whatever you're fucking good at. If you're good at baking cakes, start a fucking baking company and go to fucking town. Bake the best birthday cakes you fucking can so you can make some extra money while all this shit's going on. Because it is not gonna get better before it gets worse. You know, at some point it will. And more than likely what's going to happen is, you know, Trump's gonna say, you know what? Shit's a little tight right now. You know, the American people are feeling it. So we're gonna hold off on this tariff war. Right? And that's because, you know, he loves the American people. That's just what it is. He does love the people. You can tell that he does. And, you know, whether you agree or disagree, you know, I don't like all the motherfucking policies and you probably don't like all the shit either. You know, he's doing what he can for the American people. Also for his buddies in power, which shit, I ain't gonna lie, if I was president and my homeboys could benefit, what the fuck do you think I would do? I'd be like, yo, tax breaks for my boys' companies, baby. But it is what it is. I'm just saying. So, you know, now you understand why this could be a potential problem. You know, this is just a layman's term, like a layman's explanation. This isn't like super in depth because I'm not an economist. I'm just good with fucking numbers, right? So just understand that this shit could be a fucking problem. You guys might want to get ahead of it by starting some type of business that does not rely on importing a shit ton of fucking goods.